Welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm Josh with TBR Gunworks, and today I wanted to do something a little more fun and less serious, and we're going to react to IREC veteran 8888's video on the top 10 tips for home gunsmiths. We'll see if he's putting out some good information or if he's just, throwing out some lazy stuff. We'll see. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, let's get her started. I've watched like a little bit of this, but not the entire thing. So let's see.
Welcome
let's see
back,
where
everybody.
it goes.
This is Eric here.
We're gonna skip to like, we're gonna skip the advertisements.
Okay. So let's break into.
And we're gonna start with number one.
Number one. Know your limits and when you're in over your head. This is very important. Look, it's okay to break into a project. It's okay to grab a gun and start pulling it apart and just see how far you can get with it and everything like that. But if it gets to a point where you're about to do something that you're going to regret, it's probably important to recognize that and go to a professional.
Couldn't agree more. There's a lot of times where you could dig into your own gun and you could actually fix something that's really simple. AR-15s are a great example for this. There's tons of things that there's really no real reason to be paying a gunsmith to do it. Don't get me wrong. I take the money and I enjoy the money. But a lot of this stuff's extremely easy to fix. It's like Legos. You swap a part out, you're good to go. But when you're diving into things that are a lot more complicated, like, even 1911s can be intimidating for people who have no idea what they're doing and have no reference for how these guns should look and how they should work internally. Then it can be a little intimidating. As you get deeper in, even 1911s are really, really easy to work on, like to swap out parts and disassemble, reassemble. It's not like taking apart a PC for the very first time and seeing wires everywhere and not knowing where anything is. The PCs are a little more complicated, right? The computer, taking every single part out of that is a little more complicated than even a 1911. So that's a good first tip.
Okay. Look, there's no shame in it, right? If you have a gunsmith at your local FFL, like when I worked at Moss with Ray up there, we would have people come in all the time with a bat.
What's
now,
the next tip?
A lot of gunsmiths are going to charge you more money to fix a screw up. That's okay.
You know what?
Now, a lot of gunsmiths are going to charge you more money to fix a screw up than they are if you would have just brought it to them in the first place.
100%. And there's a reason for that. So if you disassemble your firearm and you're pretty confident you can fix the issue, and then not only is the issue not fixed, you have created a separate issue because of whatever dumb thing you did. We're going to charge more. Like, we're going to charge more for fixing not only the original issue, but also the screw up that's added to the issue. That's just how business works. Like, if you want things done right the very first time, bring it to me. If I mess it up, well, you get stuff fixed, for free, right? There's the business side where now I have to cover what I just screwed up, if, for what weird example I screwed up. But when you have an issue and then instead of getting that issue fixed right the first time, you add a secondary issue, you're going to get charged more. A lot of gunsmiths call this like the dummy tax or the a-hole tax. Now, I'm not one of those gunsmiths, but I can tell you there are gunsmiths out there who specifically add on a tax for if you tried and screwed it up so royally that you added a secondary issue. Yeah, they're going to charge extra. I forgot, this is about all I've seen. I see he's bringing up screwdriver bits. Let's see what he says for number 2.
Invest in a quality screwdriver set like the Brownells Magnatip set. This is very important. Not all screwdrivers are made equal. I have to say that probably one of the most common problems that I ever saw when I was working with Ray in the gunsmith shop at Moss was that people would use the incorrect screws.
Okay, 100% accurate. Okay, I actually made a reel about this the other day, and I put it on, I think it was just Instagram. But these are hollow ground bits as opposed to straight tapered bits. So a lot of times on a flathead, you'll see a straight taper, and then these are hollow ground. So as you can see in the video, they have this curvature. That's the hollow grind. This allows them to fit into the flathead slots more evenly, and you can actually dial in exactly which bit you need. As you can see in this kit he's got here, the entire kit is flatheads. Besides this small little section over here, this entire kit, let me full screen this. This entire kit is made up of flatheads, and that's so you can dial in exactly what size you need to fit into the flathead slot, right? It's just something that you apply torque more evenly when your screwdriver bit reaches the bottom of the flathead and actually fills up that gap side to side all the way and gets the full depth. You're less likely to strip flatheads or heads in general when you have the proper bit. And also, like I said, when you have really tough stuck screws, this allows you to get that torque applied more evenly. So not only does it avoid stripping, like, the rounding off and hollowing out of that cutout, it also prevents you from breaking heads as bad. And breaking heads is a very real problem that happens.
Ray in the gunsmith shop at Moss was that people would use the incorrect screwdriver bits. Okay,
yeah, I'm not saying through all of this, so I'm going to skip through some of these things.
Regular mechanic screwdriver in there and look at it under.
Yeah. Okay. So what he was just talking about there was when you see the straight tapered bits in normal screwdrivers, the flatheads, that straight taper, and you'll see this. I drew a little drawing on Instagram. That straight taper now only touches the screw head on two specific points. Wherever that taper gets wide enough to touch on both sides of the gap in the flathead is where it's touching, and that's it. That's the only place it's touching. Maybe the bottom if it doesn't get wide too fast and it can actually reach the bottom. But that's why you see stripping. You're only applying the torque to that thin point of contact where the taper gets wide enough to touch the edges of the flathead gap or slot. And that's not always the case either, because you might have one that's so thin compared to the width of that slot in the head that it doesn't touch on both sides. And as you turn it, it touches on the corners. And then that's the worst case scenario. That's awful. And most of the screws you're going to find on guns are flatheads. They should be. Phillips heads have no right being on firearms. They strip too easy. There's no answer to not stripping Phillips heads. They're awful designs when it comes to like stripping. You'll see Torx a lot on accessories, and you'll see Allens or Hex a lot on accessories. And Hexes are made by Satan, and they're made to strip.
They'll cover a myriad of different screw. Especially on a really expensive gun set that you should have in your range bag anyway. They also invest in it. You'll be glad you did. All right. Number 3, I recommend a set of the T-handle Hex drivers. All right. So
that I wouldn't put that in my top 10 at all. I would not put T-handle drivers in my top 10. I would invest in really good Allens that have crisp edges, that have a variety of sizes. So you're having a much smaller incremental advances in size. Because like I just said, Hexes are made from Satan, and they are made on purpose to strip, I swear. In fact, I'm at the point now where if I see a Hex screw, I really just want to throw a Torx in there, smash it in, and back it out and replace that screw with the Torx head screw, because the Hexes are awful. I'm skipping this entire tip. You don't need T-handle drivers. They can be nice, but it would not be in my top 10 for gunsmithing at home. So we're going to skip to the next one, number 4.
They're not that expensive, and they'll serve you.
They can be.
Bunch of different ways.
They absolutely can be expensive,
but also in the mechanic shop. All right, number 4. If a screw won't move, don't force it. Apply heat or some creeping oil like Croil and try again. All right, so Croil is...
Okay, Croil is the best. Croil is the best creeping oil in existence. There's no argument about that. Adding heat. Heat is definitely one of the things that you will eventually have to do to get a screw unstuck. But man, be careful with heat. He might mention it. I stopped him right as he started. He might mention that you need to be careful with the amount of heat you use, and where you direct it, how you direct the heat, because there's a lot of situations where you need to heat up a very specific point, and everything around it cannot be heated up at all. It's dangerous. But Croil is the best. Croil will creep, and it will get into all the threads that can be got into at all. If Croil can't get into it, nothing else will. The one downside to Croil is if you let it sit in there for too long, it can corrode your firearm. You need to be I've let things sit for a week. Like, that's the longest I've ever gone. But I know guys who have set it in stuff for like 2 months because they had this horribly awful job they had to deal with, and they told the customer, "You're going to be waiting a long time. I'm going to see if it'll unseize, blah, 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 blah." And they come back to it 2 months later saying, "Okay, cool, it's definitely got to be unseized by now." And it started to corrode. So be careful with it, but that's months. I've done a week and had no issues. And then if it's not moving, he's right. If it's not moving, it's not moving for a reason. You'll often see rust, corrosion, Loctite of incorrectly used Loctite, stuff like Rockset, any kind of thread locking agent is a big common one. But most of the time it's rust. Most of the time it's rust in combination with torque.
A product that I strongly recommend. It really only has one specific use, but it's known as the oil that creeps. Break loose stuck parts. Okay, pick you up one of those kitchen torches, like you see the people they caramelize the sugar on like a creme brulee or something.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point. Excuse me. The kitchen torch would be better for pinpointing that flame, a little better than like a big propane handheld torch or a MAP gas handheld torch. Unless you've got a really dialable nozzle for those torches, they can be a little bit too much flame for what you need to do. And you end up heating up everything. And the whole thing about heating it up is it causes things to expand, right, and break loose of stuff. And that's why, like, sometimes you'll see guys when they're putting a tight barrel into a gun, it's like it's a press fit, like you just need to push it in, and then there's some kind of locking collar or there's screws. Okay, 1022 barrels. 1022 barrels, you push them in, and then there's this V-block that you put on there and tighten down with 2 screws. Well, if you got like a really tight fit 1022, a lot of guys will throw that barrel into the freezer and get it nice and cold, and then heat up the receiver. So the receiver expands, which it's interesting. It kind of works in both ways because it's expanding out, but that also means the outer diameter of that hole for the barrel could also expand this way. It's a little, I'm not like a thermodynamics master, so it's just kind of the thing you do. You heat up the one that needs to expand, and then you put the one that needs to shrink in the freezer because you're going to get a microscopic level of shrinkage, and it's easier to press in. Just something you see a lot of the time. But yeah, the kitchen torch is a good idea.
Something like that, like a little kitchen torch. Pick yourself up a small torch from Home Depot or wherever, and just use a little bit of heat. Apply a little bit of Croil, a couple of drops, and just
that's
work
what we talked about. One of the
heat,
next one,
and then apply, or in some cases, I've seen people use green sleeve retaining compound. Now, if they've done that, it ain't coming loose.
What did he just talk about?
Keep Loctite, blue Loctite, red Loctite.
Loctite. Okay, every Loctite has its purpose. There is actually, even though everyone's going to disagree with me, there is actually a very rare use for red Loctite in gunsmithing. There are uses for blue Loctite in gunsmithing. There are uses for purple Loctite in gunsmithing. There are uses for green, the friction fit stuff. But they're all their own individual uses. They're not interchangeable. Same thing with Rockset. That's actually, I don't know. It's a hot button topic, man. I'm gonna get heat. I guarantee I'm gonna get heat for people even saying that Loctite has a use in gunsmithing, but it does. I'm not gonna go into that right now. Maybe one day I'll do a video on like the different uses of Loctite with gunsmithing or thread locking agents. But you have to be wise. You have to know the difference in all these different Loctites or thread locking agents. Know what breaks them free, what their best use case is for. But you will get plenty of jobs where things have gone wrong because somebody at one point in time used either the wrong Loctite or just Loctite in general for something that didn't need it. A lot of the times you'll see an abhorrent amount of blue Loctite on scope ring screws. It's a disaster. It causes things to snap. It's not good. But we're going to go to the next one. If I can find it. There we go.
Take a step back. Drink some coffee. And think about it.
Drink some coffee. Okay, I'll drink some water.
Number 5. Cold bluing has its place for touch-ups if done properly. Now,
very true.
Some of my old videos on YouTube, I'm not going to get into a ton of detail on this because I feel like it's kind of another conversation. But, I've done some videos before where I've used cold blue to completely re-blue entire fire.
I know what he's talking about. I've seen those videos. It's really funny. So cold blue is impossible to make blue an entire firearm evenly with no cloudiness or shifts in the level of coloration. Like it's inconsistent, and it's so dependent on so many factors that maybe there is a perfect world where like in a vacuum you could somehow get cold blue to blue an entire firearm evenly. But it's not realistic. Like in the real world, you don't do it, but you do use it for touch-ups. I've seen the Formula 4440 before. I've used it once. I wasn't like, it did okay. I've used the Oxfo Blue from Brownells. They have a couple different formula. I think they have like a thick paste and then like a liquid. That one worked, like the Brownells Oxfo Blue works pretty good. The Beechwood Casey or Birchwood Casey, I think it's Birchwood Casey. Theirs is pretty crappy, to be honest, but so are a lot of their products. Like, I'm not trying to throw them underneath the bus, but a lot of their products are not great. They're subpar, but like entry level stuff where like you're like, if you're just trying to learn how to finish stocks, maybe True Oil is the way to go. But at the high end of stock finishing, you're not going to go anywhere near True Oil.
Firearms, probably not the best thing to do, but bluing is awesome for touch-ups. So if you're
cold bluing is awesome for touch-ups.
And
hot bluing is good for doing the entire thing.
You have a scratch on a gun, maybe it's a hunting rifle that you know, I don't know, for whatever.
He's using steel wool, quadruple-aught steel wool to apply the bluing. That's interesting.
Reason you had some handling marks on it, and there's some spots where the bluing's got some wear or a scratch, even a single scratch. It's just, you can see the white of the metal where the bluing has been rubbed through. Cold bluing is great. Oxfo Blue is king. You can get it from Brownells.
Oxfo Blue is great. I'm telling you.
The Oxfo Blue is a really, really great.
I feel like I have to say again, when he says heat is your friend, to an extent, because you keep seeing him heating up the metal. This is called cold blue because it's not like a 280 degree or 300 degree boiling tank of salts. But be careful with how much heat you use. Just let it be noted, because a lot of these won't even tell you to use heat.
Great product. It is fantastic, and I recommend using some cotton swabs, or possibly you could use some Q-tips. But again, heat is your friend.
Q-tips are good for really small
touch-ups.
touch-ups.
A little bit of heat, and if you warm that metal up before you apply the cold bluing, it really helps it adhere. Okay, and it'll turn the darkest black, and it'll look really, really great. And look, if you're in,
I think he's overselling it here a little bit. It's not gonna turn the darkest black. Like you can get it to darken up, but it's like he's not telling you that it also depends on what kind of steel, like what you're working on, what kind of metal you're working on, the temperature you're working at, which bluing material or bluing agent you're using. There are lots of factors, like we said. How well did you prep the metal? You know what I mean? I don't expect too much out of cold bluing, like quality wise. Just kind of enjoy the fact that it's going to touch it up a little bit.
Doubt about using cold blue? Test it on something, right? Find a scrap piece of barrel or whatever you might have laying around.
If you're gunsmithing, you're going to have lots of scrap metal to work on to practice stuff. So we're going to go to the next one. What's the next one?
Oil and steel wool are your friend. Okay.
I'm actually really surprised he brought this up. I'm going to assume that he's bringing this up for cleaning up firearms, removing rust and corrosion.
I can't tell you, I cannot emphasize this enough. Like, I've seen so many rusty, nasty guns come in, and people are going, oh my gosh, how in the world are we going to clean all? I mean, I'm talking red, frothing with rust, and you're thinking, wow, there's no way you're going to clean that gun, right? Well, there's a couple of different things you can do, all right? If the gun's completely covered in rust, well, Mark Novak would tell you to boil it out.
Shout out to Mark Novak, super cool dude. One of the best, in my opinion, the best gunsmith in the Southeast.
He's true. He's correct. That red oxide will convert into black oxide in boiling water, so you'd be surprised. Yep.
You boil the firearm, boil the rusty metal, and then what you're doing is converting I think, man, Mark goes into so much detail on it, but I think it's like ferroferric oxide into something else oxide. So red oxide to black oxide. And that's to be fair, that's what bluing is. By the way, for those of you who don't know, bluing is controlled rust. It is a rusting process where you are controlling the rate at which it rusts and then the coloration of the rust. And so you can actually boil rusty guns and turn that red oxide to black oxide and card off the slag, all the material, and you'll get an almost blued gun again underneath it. Now this has its limits. He's talking about the boiling. This is not even his point. He's talking about Mark Novak, but Mark Novak's a friend of mine. It got me thinking. It has its limits. You have a super duper unbelievably deep pitted rusted gun, then it's not the best option. A lot of the times that's where you want your refinish jobs. If people are interested in the refinish job, it'll still be pitted. The metal that has now gone away because of the rust is still gone away. So the pits are still going to be there. But what he's talking about is oil and steel wool. And this is not the steel wool you're thinking of, like the really aggressive steel wool. This is like quadruple aught steel wool. And it's amazing for removing even like moderate rust from metal. And it's a really good process. It's a filthy process. Like, it is unbelievably filthy. You get CLP and you get the steel wool, quadruple aught steel wool, and you're going to rub the metal and you think it's going to scratch, but it doesn't. It just does not scratch unless you're absolutely digging in way too hard, which you shouldn't be. Light passes, and that oil and in combination with the steel wool is going to break down that rust and get it off the barrel. Now, this doesn't prevent it from rusting in the future. This just takes off what's there, right? Keeping it coated with a good rust preventative oil, and even CLP does a decent job at that, is really important. But it's a filthy process, and I'm not sure everyone wants to do that at home. Definitely not something you're going to do on the kitchen table. This is something you're going to do like in your shop on a ton of paper towels, because it's going to be nasty.
If a gun is completely and uniformly covered in red rust and you're thinking, wow, this thing's never going to clean up, take it apart, boil it.
Yeah.
You'll convert the red oxide to black oxide. And then you card it. You've got bluing.
Carding is like using a extremely... Technically, you're carding when you're using like that super soft steel wool, the quadruple aught stuff. But they sell carding wheels, which are like wire wheels, but the wires are so thin and they're so non-abrasive, just like the quadruple aught steel wool, that you can brush your hand up against it while it's spinning at 2,000 RPM. And so you take it out of the boiling water and you card off that stuff with the carding wheel. And that's when you start to see the black come out.
I mean, that's how rust bluing works. You'd be surprised.
Yeah, that's exactly what rust bluing is.
Work. But getting back to the steel wool and oil, let's say it's just some light surface rust. All right, let's hope that you don't have any pitting developing. That's another story.
Yeah, the
but
pitting
say
is...
you got to clean a part off. It's got some surface
problem.
rust. Take some oil and some steel wool and just go over it. And you would think, well, steel wool, isn't that going to rub the
See, he's using
off?
aggressive steel wool right
Absolutely
there. I don't know
not.
what he's doing
You
there.
need to use a
That is
3 or
not
quad
quadruple aught.
I use quad aught, the real fine stuff.
That's not
Take
quad aught.
Steel wool, get it.
You see how
oiled
abrasive
up,
that was?
Whatever oil you have, and just go over it lightly.
You might be dealing with like a pretty like rough gun, so it doesn't matter in the video. But quadruple aught, like, it's thin. It's like hair thin, like really like your grandpa's hair thin.
And it will clean it right up. It will brighten that bluing right back up. Totally a hack. Totally something that everybody that does their own gunsmithing needs to know. Took me
Agreed.
a long time
What's
to
the
learn
next
this
one?
stuff. So I'm eventually want to share this with you and save you a lot of
Number
trouble.
7.
Okay, number 7. If you clean a lot of guns, you'll eventually want to invest in ultrasonic. This is so important, especially if you're ever going to wind.
Okay. I disagree that it is important for the home gunsmith. The reason is the cheap and affordable ultrasonic cleaners they don't do much. The firearms where you look at it and you think, dang, I need the ultrasonic for this. The cheaper and affordable ultrasonic cleaners do not do a good job at actually taking away the grime and the oil and carbon. A lot of the times I'll use it to break up like really hard baked carbon and make that easier to scrape off. But what you're seeing in this video is actually a much better, it's a really good tank. And then it's also wholly dependent on which solvent you put in there. Getting the right mixture of your solvent to water and which solvent you're using is really important. I don't have any recommendations because I only have a pretty affordable, low quality ultrasonic cleaner, and I haven't figured out a good solvent ratio that works with that one when cleaning pistols. So I clean everything by hand. I just developed a system with cleanings to make it go by a little faster and crank them out. But if you had one that you had really dialed in, like if you had an ultrasonic cleaner that you had working really, really well, this is a huge time saver because you can have it running while you're working on something else. as the home gunsmith though, where like you're really working on your own stuff and you're not like getting an FFL and turning around high volume, I don't see how necessary it is. I'm not sure I would put it in my top 10.
Up getting into gunsmithing professionally, and let's say
Okay,
you're
well, he
gonna
said
clean a lot of
professionally. My
guns,
fault.
you might have 10 or 12 cleanings to do
Yeah,
throughout the entire day.
There's so many. I do so many cleanings. It's not funny. Like I would genuinely say like 45% of my gunsmithing time is cleanings.
Or if you're an enthusiast home gunsmith,
Maybe 30%.
like we're talking about here, and let's
But
just
it's a
say
lot.
you shoot a lot of guns. You went to the range and you took 8 or 10 guns out.
All right,
and
we
now
get it.
you get back, it's like, wow, I've got 10 guns to clean today. There, drink some coffee, unload your truck, reload your mags, do inventory and talk.
See, that looks like he's using simple green, and I've actually tried running simple green. I think the ratios guys, just be aware that you're gonna have to play with it and figure out your ratios and actually measure. Because the problem is, if you get too aggressive with your solvent, you can start to take finishes off. Like you got to be careful. You need to be measuring the ratios of water to solvent to figure out how much is going to work for you. We're gonna go to the next one. I wouldn't rate ultrasonic cleaners on my top 10. Okay, next one coming up.
Number 8, keep your workbench as clean as possible.
Agreed.
This is very important.
Agreed.
The reason you want to keep your workbench clean is because you are interacting with your firearm on your workbench.
Yeah,
right? You
that's
don't
what a
want
bench
to get parts
does.
mixed up with another gun. That's important.
Magnet trays or baggies or both.
You don't want a tool scratching a gun. So if you're dealing with a bunch of different firearms, and again, this could also really deal.
That's one of the most irritating thing about guns, about working on guns, is everything is trying to scratch the finish on the gun you're working on. Everything. You're a screwdriver. You slip, like you're trying to take a screw out and you slip outside of that screw slot, and now you scratch the frame or the gun or the stock, Everything is actively working against you to try and damage the finish of the firearm you're working on. But if you're scared about mixing up parts, get lots of magnet trays or lots of baggies and Sharpies. Write everything down. Like, hey, this baggie is for this gun, and these are the parts that are in there. Take pictures if, like, you guys. I mean, this is probably something I would put in my top 10, and it's not like a thing to get. It is a tip. Take pictures of the guns and how the parts go together before you break them down. Like if you're taking something apart for the first time, like let's say it's a revolver and you get the side plate off and you're like, I'm pretty confident I can get it back together. Take a picture of it so you know exactly where everything should sit, how it should look when it's sitting in the right place. Keeping your workbench clean is super important. Let's see if he goes over every reason why.
With professionals as well. You ever notice that a professional gunsmith generally has a very clean bench?
I do, but my Instagram looks like it's not, because I take pictures in the middle of jobs.
Yeah, because if you bring Grandpappy's, I don't know, crown grade fancy Turkish walnut sweet 16 Browning that was made in 1950 or something like that ain't got a scratch on it, or it's an heirloom piece, you definitely don't want your ring scratching it or a tool or
That happened to me for the first time like 3 months ago.
You've got a messy workbench.
Ceramic ring scratched the wooden stock. I was so mad.
With a bunch of crap laying all over it. And what do? You're not going to put the gun down on, have a hammer.
Okay, so I don't like how long he's taking to talk about this. One of the most important things is if you do any metal work where you're filing or sanding metal, you need to have a dedicated area for that you clean up every single time you do it. Because otherwise, if you forget one day and you set a wooden rifle down or some sort of wooden surface down on that same surface that you're doing filing or sanding on, or any kind of machining, drilling, whatever, you're going to find a piece of metal embedded in the stock. Like it's going to happen to you, and it's going to piss you off. So have separated areas. But also, one of the most important reasons to keep your bench clean is if a part goes flying, which it will happen, you will do the gunsmith crawl at some point in your life. You're going to have a spring or a detent or a ball bearing, which you'd be surprised how. And those are really detents. They're really tiny ones used for detents, but there's different types of detents, cylindrical and spherical. Those are going to go flying on you at some point, and you need to get down and look for them on your bench or on the ground near your bench. If you keep these surfaces clean with no foreign objects on them, then a foreign object that shouldn't be there sticks out. Like if you're looking on a concrete floor and you're looking for a spring, but there's tons of like dust, maybe some dirt. You got like a leaf or two in there because it's your garage. Leaves blow in the garage. Happens all the time. Or you've got, I don't know, like just things that collect themselves on the floor. Other parts, like maybe you're going through high volume of parts and you got, really cheap detents falling. You just grab another one, put it on there. Like you got a bag of detents, you lose one, you say screw it, you grab a new one, you put it in, right? I know guys that do that. They just have baggies of detents, so they don't have to search for them. If those are all over the floor, you're never going to find what you're looking for because everything's going to pull your eye away from where everything's catching your eye or everything blends in. If the floor and the bench are clean and there are no foreign objects, it is a smooth surface, or at least a relatively smooth surface, because I know, wooden benches aren't exactly smooth. That foreign object, that spring or that detent is going to stand out like a sore thumb on the floor or the bench if it's clean. It makes it really easy to find stuff. And that's that's my personal most important reason to have the bench clean and the surrounding area is for finding parts, because they will fly on you. Like, it's going to happen. Okay. Anyone who's even just building ARs, even just assembling ARs, you're going to lose detents. I mean, I know guys that assemble ARs in a big clear baggie, so that if anything goes flying, it goes flying inside the baggie, and they can just grab it. But it's really important to keep your bench clean.
A file sitting on the bench.
And do not do gunsmithing near carpet. You're just literally asking to chuck money down the toilet to buy replacement parts that you cannot find because they are embedded in the carpet.
And so, like, putting your tools back where they belong and keeping your bench nice and clean.
Be organized.
Is going to ensure that you're not going to inadvertently scratch up or mar up or mess.
This also helps you stay focused. Like if you clean up after every single job, put every single tool back where it goes as soon as you finish a job, even if you might need it for the next one you pull out of the safe or the wall, whatever you're doing, just put it back. I'm telling you, there's something it does for you mentally. Being organized is good for you mentally. I promise you.
Up a fine
We're going to the next one. We've talked about this one long enough.
It's just good.
Number 9.
Number 9. Brownell's Gunsmith Kinks are a great read for lots of little tips and hacks. Yes. I've
agree, but I also disagree to an extent. I don't know why he's going to give... Gunsmith Kinks is like it's like 4 volumes of books of an assembly of tool or tips that have been given by gunsmiths over the decades and decades and decades. This started with, I think, the actual man who started Brownells. Like, this is the original Brownells. He started assembling these things from across the country. Dude, a lot of this is just like some old man giving you like a poetry rhyme that sounds like inspirational for business. Like there's stuff in there that is completely useless for the modern gunsmith. But there is a lot of good information in there for certain firearms, like specific tips for a firearm. Like, disassembling this one can be tricky. Here's what I found to help me out when disassembling it, right? That's the good stuff. A lot of the business side of the tips are no longer as relevant because they're very focused and based on the technology of the times. So, like being really focused on newspapers is not as important now for advertising as other advertising tools like social media or, dude, even electronic billboards. I'm seeing people really go nuts for. I don't really know if I believe in billboards anymore, but a lot of the business side of things can be a little outdated in certain areas, but a lot of the information is good. In fact, even one of them is like, hey, stop giving discounts to your friends. Like, if they respect you for being an entrepreneur or a business starter, then they should pay full price, just like, you would give them, which it sounds bad because I actually do give my friends discounts, but you start giving everyone who calls themselves your friend a discount, you're not going to be making any money at all, and you're going to be losing money because guess what? As soon as someone needs something, they all think, oh my gosh, I'm friends with him, I'll get a discount. Well, how many people do you think you know? If the number is above 5, you're giving too many discounts.
Got all the volumes of the Brownells Gunsmith Kinks. Again, a big shout out to Brownells. Basically, the Kinks are just...
They're not that expensive either.
With all sorts of little cool hacks that you can learn for the hobby gunsmith and the professional alike. So
yeah,
if you...
He's not wrong, but like, once again...
And some of the information...
Not sure it would be in my top 10 because... Especially since we have the internet now, there's so much free information that's available online for you to go look up that there's only been a few times where I've had to dive into Gunsmith Kinks, guys, to look for something. So I don't know if I'd put it on my top 10.
is so awesome, and some of the stories are kind of funny too. Some of them are just little stories that Gunsmiths have shared.
There
over
are
the
some
years.
funny
So
stories in there, but
if
it's
you're
not
getting into it.
going to blow your
It might
mind.
be a great read to pick up a couple of volumes of Gunsmith Kinks. I strongly recommend it. Plus knowledge too, which is always fun. Okay. Number 10, invest in quality cleaning rods, jags, pulls, brushes, and mops. Don't overlook bore snakes for a quick cleaning. This is very important.
He's 100%. So this is like, there's been 3 that definitely I don't think belonged on a top 10 list. This is not one of them. This is hugely important. Getting the right tools for the bore side of the cleaning is really important. If you've got a bore that's unbelievably corroded, you need to know how you're going to tackle that cleaning and getting it to be where you can see the bare metal, because it might be horribly pitted, or it could just be like tons of carbon and grime that's built up, and you can't always tell without a bore camera. Just looking down at a light source whether or not that is rust, pits, or just carbon buildup, right? So having the right tool to tackle the job is really important. People don't understand, like, jags are so good for cleaning barrels, and I don't like patch pullers as much as I do the jags. But getting the right jag is like, dude, that alone is amazing. Like this number 10 could have just been get jags. Start using jags.
You begin to, engage in your own home gunsmithing, you're going to find that, you're going to run into some situations where you certainly are going to need a variety of different cleaning rods and different cleaning attachments to properly perform various tasks.
My man's using ballast.
Now, I'm not going to get into a ton of detail here because we have other videos where we talk about some of this stuff, but such as like slugging a borer, or maybe you need to do a chamber casting or something.
Chamber casting. Funnily enough, he also has a video on that. That is, use Cero's safe for that.
Like that. Okay. It helps to have some sturdy rods that you can really put the brakes on something.
Dude, you got to get the right rods. That's one thing I forgot to mention too. That's perfect to go with the right jag. Getting cheap and crappy rods that will bend all the time when you actually have to exert some force into the bore is really, really important. So I don't like getting the segmented rods. You're just asking for problems when those threaded sections can bend so easily. I like getting solid rods that maybe they're carbon fiber, maybe they're just stainless steel. It doesn't matter. But you want something that's good, that's sturdy. Okay. And another thing is, a lot of guys will put rods in there to beat out, let's say a squib, which a lot of times in pistol barrels, guys, you can just get a really long punch, a really long flat punch to knock it out without damaging the barrel, like just so you know. But they'll use cleaning rods with nothing on the end of it, and they just beat the cleaning rod into a squib, and now, yeah, maybe you got it out, but now your cleaning rod's ruined. If you're going to do that, put a jag in there, because the pointy end will go into the squib, and you can push it out, and you won't damage the threaded section of your cleaning rod as bad. I see that too many times, dude. It's not even funny. Yeah. Get the right jags, get the right cleaning rods, and get the right adapters for different sizes of brushes, jags, mops. Mops are actually pretty. I only use mops with shotguns. Like that's something that I rarely use. Bore snakes are actually not bad. I put bore snakes in on my range bags because they're great for just stuff in the field when you just need to do a quick cleaning, because you're trying to test some ammo without having too much fouling in there. So you'll fire, I don't know, maybe you fire 10 shots and you'll do a quick cleaning with a bore snake just to take some of the fouling out, so you can get another velocity test or whatever, a chrono.
Then maybe you've got a stuck bolt, or you've got a stuck part or something, and you've got to really put the brakes on something, hit it hard. Having a variety of different rods of very different material types.
Stuck bolt. I'm trying to figure out what scenario with a stuck bolt would cause me to have to use a cleaning rod to beat it open.
I do like the Tipman rods quite a bit. Also,
Tipman's
Shooter's
good.
Choice rods are fantastic. I love the Shooter's Choice pistol rods.
I don't think I've used Shooter's Choice. Okay, guys, I know we didn't finish his video, but shout out to IV8888. There was only 3 things on this list that I didn't think actually belong in a top 10, maybe top 15, top 20. I don't think I'm going to do my own top 10. I think he covered some of the most important things he covered. Definitely the right screwdriver bits is one of the most important. The right cleaning materials is really important. And then I forgot, there was another one that was super important. Oh, Croil, maybe the Croil part. I think Croil is really important. You're going to come into seized up screws all the time. Croil is super important. I highly recommend investing in Croil and a gunsmithing screwdriver set. It's going to save you a lot of heartache, and it's going to do things right for you. So way to go. I'll put his original video link in the description if you guys want to go check it out. And I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. And remember, every gun law is an infringement. Take care.